the 2010 film Social Network by David Fincher, starring Jesse Eisenberg, Andrew Garfield, Justin Timberlake. IMDb summary: as Harvard student Mark Zuckerberg creates the social networking site that would become Facebook, he's sued by the twins who claimed he stole the idea and the co-founder who was later squeezed out of the business. So this is a film I saw in theaters. I'm a big David Fincher fan. I want to say before getting into my thoughts here that it's obviously based on a real life person and a real life company and story. But I want to put all that aside, especially considering this is 10 years after this movie was made. So I'm trying to divorce myself from a lot of my thoughts on Mark Zuckerberg, the person, and talk about Mark Zuckerberg, the character, and different things in this movie that resonate with me. And to me, what at the time when I saw this film, the two things that spoke to me in it, first of all, I think it does capture in certain aspects really well the tumultuous experience of being at an early stage startup. I've been in two startups in my life. Once in high school, there was a late stage pre-IPO startup that ended up going bust in the dot-com bust of 2000. And then a pre-seed startup after I graduated from business school with like 4 or 5 other people that also then went bust too. So it does capture a little bit of that that I think does well and reminds me of those times. But for me, what the crux of this film and really how I use this to help guide me in my career is around what motivates people to make decisions and career choices and what motivates them in their work. And I think what this film does well is show the darker side of some of these motivations. There's one particular scene that I think back to this actually a lot when I'm sort of put in similar-ish situations. It's a scene where Justin Timberlake, who plays Sean Parker, who's a successful internet startup figure, founded Napster. So his character is talking to Mark Zuckerberg, and they're in this nightclub. And Mark Zuckerberg's played with Jesse Eisenberg. They're in this nightclub, and it's the way that Fincher does this scene, the colors, the lights, the sounds, very loud sounds, all these people dancing around, and the way that they're framing Justin Timberlake in this scene is like he's the devil tempting Mark Zuckerberg into this pact, into this deal of, oh, you can get rich and get all the women and all these things. And he's explaining how he started Napster just to get back at a girl. And his motivation was that of revenge. And now look at all these riches that he has, and he has this power and all these things. None of this stuff was about, the great products he created or the value for customers or thinking about any of that stuff. It was all about himself and getting that power, which Mark Zuckerberg's character in this film too, he starts Facebook to mock other women at Harvard. It's not about providing value. It's to enact revenge, and he wants power. And it's not really even for him about the money either. He grew up wealthy, a middle-class, wealthy background. It was never about rags to riches for Mark Zuckerberg. There was something else there for him in this film. And I think this movie just encapsulates that moment when he is tempted to go after the power and make those decisions about how he craves, there's even there's a line in that scene too, where, you want to be the guy to hand them a business card saying, I'm the CEO, bitch. Like, it's all about power for Sean Parker. And again, the way that this scene is done is much like you sign your soul away. And for me, I think back to that a lot when it's like, those things do not motivate me. And when I'm placed in decisions at jobs or to take jobs or to move on in my career, it's never about the power. That's not what motivates me. I want to be around great people, my teammates, the opportunities to solve interesting problems, to create great solutions for customers that, the value in the world. And it's not at all what drives me. And I think back to this scene a lot when I'm put in a situation where I feel like, I might be tempted a little bit by some of these other things, money, power, prestige in the industry, quote unquote, fame, all these sorts of things that I think are the darker sides of career. And some people, that is what motivates them. And I don't think this film necessarily passes judgment on that, just exposes you to that angle of career development. And again, I think that scene does it really masterfully well. But for me, those are things that do not motivate me. But I think back to that movie, especially that scene sometimes when I'm in those positions. So it still resonates with me, especially for that, through that lens today, 10 years later, putting everything else that's happened in the world and with Facebook aside. But that's my number 2 film. What are your thoughts on Social Network, Karan?
Well, this is my number 2 as well.
Oh, hey now. Great. So let's start why don't you then start with your thoughts on it, and then we can discuss how this movie touched each of us. So what are your thoughts on Social Network?
Yeah. No, So for me, the reason why this movie is on the list is because I think I referred in my number three explanation that there was a time when I was in LA where I was sort of feeling a little bit unfulfilled in my career journey and felt that there was more. And it just seemed to me in my head that if I really want to make impact and if I really want to create something with really smart people or what have you, maybe the San Francisco is the place that I want to go back to. And but I was sort of in this back and forth space in my head. And then I watched this movie, and what really struck me was just the power of creating something and being entrepreneurial and taking risks, whatever the motivations might be, whatever the drivers might be, just the power of creating something and having that kind of impact just felt really inspirational to me. And in many ways, that kind of, I think, helped me make that solid decision that, okay, I need to go back to San Francisco, not necessarily surround myself with the character archetypes in this movie, but it did sort of lure me in that sense and kind of seal the deal. So that was sort of the big resonating point for me. But then all the other stuff you said as well was, I remember thinking days and days after I watched this movie of the cost that you have to incur on that journey of being entrepreneurial or creating something great, no matter what that thing might be. And it's interesting, at the time I watched the movie, that cost to me was of personal relationships, friendships, and just sort of doing right by people that you are working with. That is something, just like you said, is very important to me. So it was kind of a cautionary tale in that sense that, yeah, you could have a lot of impact on something, because at that time everybody was on Facebook and using it, like crazy, including myself. But there was a cost to it, of course. Since then we've discovered that the cost is much bigger. The cost really was the cost of humanity. It's just way beyond your personal circle. So that, I think, has been very interesting to kind of ponder on as time has gone by. The other thing I would say is that my other dilemma with this movie was Fincher himself. Like, my gateway into movies has been about sort of spontaneity, people following their instincts, and the magic happens. And if you have done a good job in putting together a vision and a tight script, then the actors show up and stuff happens. And of course, the director's hand is in there all the way. That's sort of my perception of movies. And hearing, tales of Fincher taking whatever 57, 79 takes of every single scene at that time really sort of bothered me. I'm like, oh, how can you work like that? And I just tried to draw parallels to that in my own work life, that, oh, imagine if I made my team do one tiny thing over and over again, or the people who made me do that, oh, here's a presentation that we're putting together, and digging in that hole of making that one single slide absolutely perfect. That is not how I operate. To me, there are larger themes at play, and there's a balance, of course, in everything. So I remember wrestling with that. And it's, once again, it's interesting that over time I've come to really appreciate his way of working, and just hearing other actors who work with Fincher talk about what that does to them. It's not for everybody, but it unlocks this sort of sense of just being so bone tired, playing that over and over again, that it just becomes second nature. So a very interesting thing, which I also wrestle with. So again, there's like a meta commentary on how the movie was made and what it's saying about just, creating something. But all in all, I think this is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's just so well done, from the script to the performances. The score got me into so many new people, like Rooney Mara. I'd never really paid attention to Atticus and what's his name? Atticus and what's this people who did the score? That's gonna drive me crazy. But oh wow,
Yeah,
those
Nine
guys.
Inch Nails. Yeah.
Yes.
Blanket.
Who've done
Now I'm
amazing
blanking out on his
scores.
name too. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that's why this is on my list of an inspirational movie, but also a bit of a cautionary tale.
You know, it's interesting hearing, us both put this at our number two from kind of different angles. And I think that also speaks to what this film does so well. Like, it is definitely a inspiring in the sense of that startup culture, that San Francisco hustle, that entrepreneurial drive. In a way, I feel like with our generation, with the internet, especially Internet 2.0, like this, the rise when Zuckerberg ascended to his throne, the tech industry and being at these startups was sort of like the new rock stars in a way. Like, I think a lot of kids maybe 40 years ago, they were inspired by a band and then they'd pick up guitar, and that was sort of the center of culture for the youth. And tech really is, I feel, in a way, for our generation. And I think this film captures that really well. And I just know anecdotally, a lot of friends that I know or acquaintances, they talk about this movie as, oh, this made me want to go start my own company or get into an industry, which is cool that it has that effect for sure. And I think, again, what is so great about this film is it shows both that positive and it is inspiring, but then also shows that, well, what do you have to give up? And how far would you go? Because there are obviously people in that film or characters, which, are real life people. So I'll use those interchangeably, but that they don't want to cross a certain line to go a certain way. And Mark keeps pushing and pushing and pushing that, which is interesting. And I think I like how your parallels too, to just Fincher's production style. I mean, it's in a way, I feel like he's the Stanley Kubrick 2.0 inheritance of his methodology, because he was very much the same way, wanted a lot of takes to drill down to the truth. He had to wear his actors down and everyone down to then find something that he felt was truthful, as opposed to then other styles, which are much more spontaneous, which, is a way of working. And for better or for worse. So like you said, some actors like it, some don't. Produces great work, but then also sometimes not great work, depending on who does it. But that was interesting that you think back to the behind the scenes of what Fincher style's like and how that inspires your work to either, do that or not do that. So it's pretty interesting.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.